The following is intended for mature audiences only. Discretion is advised.
I took it with me to LA. I took the love of hockey with me, and now I'm out here in Connecticut, and I'm a New York Islanders fan, which you do not care about, I'm guessing.
Hey, man, it's my job to pretend to care. You know what I mean? Like, when it comes to athletes, I only know athletes that have been in movies with Bugs Bunny. Like, that's really the only... If you've been in a movie with Bugs Bunny and you play some sort of sport, I know who you are.
What's up, besties? Welcome back to a brand new episode of Childlike at Best with Mike Valdes. And as far as the U.S. government knows, I am still the second part of that title. I hope you're having a great week this week. If you want to eat cereal along with us, please do. As always, the cereal that we have on this episode is Baby Shark cereal. This is a novelty cereal that was made by General Mills and Nickelodeon. It mimics the cereals of Fruit Loops and Fruity Pebbles, all that kind of stuff. So if you want to have a cereal that emulates that, you can do that. In fact, you can actually have Snoop Hoops, which is my personal favorite of the Fruit Hoop variety right now. They're not paying me to say that, but it really is so good. If you want to try any of these cereals, you can just go to my website. Go to thekidfromup.com. There is a brand new tab on my website that says My Favorite Cereals, and it'll take you to a link on Amazon with some of my favorite cereals, and you can shop some of my favorite cereals as well as shop for whatever it is that you need that week. Maybe you need some toilet paper. Maybe you need to get a trombone, for band camp. You can get all of that while you're supporting the show on Amazon when you're already going to be on Amazon to begin with. I'm truly so excited for this episode. Today's guest is KP Anderson. KP is a stand-up comedian and executive producer of so many shows. The Soup with Joel McHale, The Dish with Danielle Fishel, More Power with Tim Allen, The Nerdist with Chris Hardwick, MacDonald Has A Show, and so many other incredible products. I mean, this is such a great episode with a lot of laughs. KP is such a silly guy, and he's so insightful to anybody that's curious about the entertainment industry whatsoever. This is such a great episode to listen to because he gives so much insight on what it is to get a show made. And it's truly such an awesome conversation, and I really think that you guys are going to love it. So, without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with KP Anderson. I kind of want to start from the very beginning with you. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a little town called Cambridge, Minnesota, about an hour north of Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the thing about Minnesota, the only thing I know about Minnesota is that some of the characters, actually all the characters from the first Mighty Ducks movie are from there. Mm-hmm. That's pretty much the only thing I know about Minnesota.
That's the extent of your knowledge of Minnesota.
That's the extent of my knowledge, yeah.
Okay.
It's
exactly like that. Everything is exactly like that.
Okay, so everybody loves hockey, especially when kids play it.
Yeah, that part is very true. That's
okay. There you go.
There's baseball bats back there, but if you can see over my right shoulder, I was just pointing at it.
Yeah,
something awful phallic looking right behind me. Which I think is just some sort of my wife's one of her little Balinese statues. But in front of our Balinese statue,
is that what they're calling them now?
Kings, yeah, the Los Angeles Kings Stanley Cup Championship game ticket.
Oh, that's amazing! Yeah, that's so cool.
I took it with me to LA. I took the love of hockey with me, and now I'm out here in Connecticut, and I'm a New York Islanders fan, which you do not care about, I'm guessing.
Hey, man, it's my job to pretend to care. You know what I mean? Like, so, I mean, the only thing that I can talk about regarding sports are just fictional sports and maybe the 1996 Chicago Bulls. Like, that's about it.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah. But
fair enough. We can,
Like
we can do Bad News Bears, and then we'll do
yes.
Michael Jordan, The Last Dance, and then we're
Yeah.
done. And then you don't need to know anything about me.
Yeah, that's what I said. Yeah, that I actually actually recently, I was kidding, but I was telling a friend, I was like, when it comes to athletes, I only know athletes that have been in movies with Bugs Bunny. Like that's really the only that's my extent of knowledge when it comes to athletes. Like so so if you've been in a movie with Bugs Bunny and you play some sort of sport, I know who you are, but that's about it.
Yeah.
So but that's awesome. Like was it a small town or what kind
Yeah,
of?
town of about 3,000 people.
Okay.
Not northern Minnesota, which is for those who do know about Minnesota, Mike,
Yes.
is like the Iron Range, Duluth, all the places that you hear about, the things that are right up next to Canada. It's sort of east central Minnesota, if you will.
Okay.
And it's just an hour. It's just an hour north of Minneapolis, so it's really kind of like now. When I was growing up, it was still a small town, kind of separated out, but now it's more of a suburb of Minneapolis.
I love it. That's so cool, man. And like growing up in a small town, what kind of a kid would you say that you were growing up? Like who were your friends? Who did you sit with at the lunch table? That kind of thing.
I sort of bridged a couple of groups. It's sort of the comic DNA, it's like you're not you're not great at being a joiner.
Sure.
And so I was friends with all of all the guys that I knew since I was 3 years old,
Right.
and people that I knew since I was like 3 years old, all kind of gravitated into hockey, baseball, football, stuff like that.
Mhm.
And I played sports, and I was an athlete. I wasn't a very good one, but I was one. And but I also played in band. I dabbled in theater. I was always kind of angling towards something else. A huge reader. I love to read. I still love to read, and I'm writing a book now. And I
That's
just,
amazing.
that's always been sort of like the larger backdrop for me. Is the manipulation of words seems to be more interesting to me than just about anything else.
Okay, that's actually very interesting. What were some of your favorite books growing up?
I always loved mysteries and thrillers.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
at some point in time, I think I caught a ride on like when I saw The Hunt for Red October with Alec Baldwin.
Yeah.
Was when I caught a ride with Tom Clancy, and
Mhm.
sort of more military spy novels, stuff like that.
Sure.
But that was more of a dalliance. So it was more of like a younger man's. Oh my God, they describe every gun and missile and how it's all that stuff. And then I realized I don't really care about guns and missiles, and so
Right.
I sort of drifted away. And I was like, no, I just want murder. I just want bodies hit.
So then you gravitated to Stephen King, which has plenty of murder.
I don't ever need a description of the murder weapon. I just want to hear what the open neck looks like.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, it's always been sort of down that road. And in my adult life, I've sort of stayed there. I do love Stephen King. I'm not a huge horror fan.
Sure.
But I later in life, during the pandemic, is when I finally decided. We were driving, my wife and daughter and I were taking an RV from Los Angeles to Minneapolis for my mom's 80th birthday. And I decided to pick up and read The Shining while I was on the way. And
It's a
all of a
great
sudden
read.
I went, oh my God, I just love his style of writing is
Yeah.
just so stark and cool and funny.
Yeah.
Which I don't think Stephen King gets enough credit for. He's a really funny writer.
Yeah.
In addition to everything else. So yeah.
I completely agree. The Shining is definitely such a fun, especially if you're gonna take a dive into your first Stephen King book. It's
Yeah.
like one of the better choices. A lot of people would say It or things like that, which it's fine. Like it's nothing. It's a better book than it is a series of television or whatever. But
Yeah.
the Shining, as far as like the written word, is so incredibly done. And I mean, Kubrick did the best he could with what he had, which is cool, but at the same time Kubrick was very Kubrick. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's super cool. I love that.
I do think it's also really interesting, like, because I saw I'd seen The Shining, however many times I'd seen The Shining in my years before I read the novel, and
Same
thing with Salem's Lot, and I don't think I saw it before I read it, but I think it's great that his writing is so good that even though you basically know what's going to happen, you're still getting goosebumps on your arms as he's describing things going on at the hotel. And you're just like, oh my God, this guy, I know what the jump scare is. And I'm still like on pins and needles waiting. Like, when's it going to happen to me now?
Right.
I'm actually reading his book Fairy Tale right now.
Okay.
And the guy's like 1,000,000 years old and he's been run over by a car and all this other stuff. And he still is just such a damn good writer.
Yeah.
He's still one of the best storytellers.
Completely agree. Yeah, absolutely, man. So, you were talking about how you were kind of, for lack of a better word, you were kind of a chameleon in school. Like, you were basically like, you were part of the jocks, you were part of the theater nerds, you were part of all that stuff. When did performing come to your head or to your creative mind?
There were two sort of inciting events. The first was when I was in college.
Okay.
Or when I was in high school rather, I was at home in Cambridge, Minnesota, and my mom loved watching PBS. She had PBS on all the time.
Okay.
And she had on a Louis Anderson stand-up special that he had done for PBS, and he'd shot it in Minneapolis because Louis was from Minneapolis as well.
Yeah.
And I was walking through the room, and she went, "You should watch this guy. He's from Minneapolis." And I watched him, and I could probably recite that act still to this day. And that Louis drawl, and then his mom getting on the freeway, and there she goes, 5, 10, 15, 20, 15, 10, 5, Mom! And I was laughing so hard, but there was also this piece of me that was like, I think I could do that.
Yeah.
And I told Louis this over the years, and it was like, that was a really good special. You were never as good as that special, Kate.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I do it. I do it every time I go on stage, I'm pretty sure. And but it was that, and then when I was in college, I was at Hamline University in St. Paul, Minnesota, go fighting Pipers.
Yeah.
Ranked somewhere in the top 800 schools in the nation at all times. But I was there.
Okay.
And I was in a public speaking class. I was a communications major, and I was in a public speaking class. And my professor in the public speaking class, after I'd done a speech on, I believe it was Alexander Jackson, and just what a hateful prick he was. My professor, Dave Lepaco was his name. He pulled me aside, and he was kind of basically like, I don't know what to do with you or about you. He said, you have all of the natural oratory, like the stuff you're here to learn, you kind of have. But he goes, the problem is that they're funny jokes, but you're more interested in using facts as setups to punchlines. And the rest of the time, it doesn't seem like you care if you're telling the truth at all about anything. And I was like, yeah, so because it's funnier if I do it this way.
Yeah.
And he basically said, you have the skill set that I'm here to teach you, and you've got it, come sort of naturally coming out of the gates. But I should probably be grading also your research if you do any, and what you're like, are you speaking to people? He said, I don't know how to regulate that. So he handed me this Twin Cities Reader local weekly flyer newspaper, and had it open to an ad for open mic night at the Comedy Gallery Uptown in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And he said, I'll tell you what, if you go to this and you report back on and perform and report back on how it goes and write a stand-up set and bring me the set and all that stuff, he said, I'll give you a B in the class. Okay. He's like, you'll get out of here with better than a C. And if you saw my transcripts, I very frequently did not do much better than a C. But he said, I'll let that happen. And that was sort of like the final that, lit the fire and did everything else, because I went down to the Comedy Gallery like the next Monday. All I needed was somebody to tell me to go do it, because it was something that I'd been in a couple of plays in college. And by then I think I was a sophomore, and I'd been dabbling about that way, but I wasn't, nobody had ever said to me, oh my gosh, you should go be a comic. Oh my gosh, you should be an actor. You should be a writer. They just kind of kept acknowledging that I was sort of good at it. And so when I went down, I did my first open mic. I think I had 5 minutes, something like that. Okay. And the owner of the comedy gallery chain up in Minneapolis, a gentleman named Scott Hansen, who passed away last year, rest him. Scott was there, and he saw me, and it was a crazy night because, like, I don't know if you're a Mystery Science Theater 3000 fan.
I am, yeah.
But Joel Hodgson, who created MST3K, who was the original star, was there, and Frank Conniff, who was on it, was there, and Frank was
so cool,
a constant presence in Minnesota comedy. But yeah, so Maria Bamford, it was her first night doing stand up as well.
Love Maria Bamford. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and
forced to be reckoned with.
Yeah, Maria, and oh god, she was so, like, you think she's weird now. She was wearing a shower cap and had an accordion. And I don't think Jackie Cation had come along then yet, but it was such a great.
Love Jackie.
There was such a great group of comics that came out of sort of my generation in Minneapolis. Like Nick Swartzen was at the tail end of it.
Wow.
Mitch Hedberg was from Minnesota and of the same age group as us, but he started in Florida. In Mitch's words, I wanted to start in Texas, but the alignment was off. But he was coming through a lot. We had a great group. But yeah, that night at the Comedy Gallery in Uptown, Scott saw me and he offered me a weekly house MC job on Friday and Saturday nights at a club that they had in a Days Inn Maplewood, Minnesota, which is a little suburb outside of Minneapolis. And that was kind of by the time I was a senior, I was going to class Monday and Tuesday and touring Wednesday through Sunday.
Wow, that is, it's funny because something that I've noticed, at least with a lot of comics, I mean, is kind of that comedy in a weird way finds you as opposed to you finding comedy, because that actually happened to me as well, where I'm an actor through and through. Like, I would say I'm an actor before I say I'm a comedian, and I've been doing comedy for almost 10 years, but I respect comedy so much, which I think the reason why I'm even slightly good is because of how much I respect it, because I'm just like, I need to either get good or get out. Like, because there's so many other people that are better than me, and I was basically told by a manager, like, hey, find a way to get on stage, do improv classes, whatever. And I was like, I can't afford improv classes. So I started doing stand up because I felt like I had to. Like I had no choice. And I ate bags and bags and bags of dicks, but I kept thinking, well, I'm doing my thing, I'm doing my job, I'm doing what she's telling me to do. At the end of the day, even if I eat a bag of dicks, I'm fine, Yeah. And then eventually I started getting kind of good, and then a little bit better, and then a little bit better, and I'm sure the same kind of trajectory for yourself as well, but yeah, it's a funny thing because, when we were kids, and I'm sure this happened with you as well, where the funny guy in school was just a guy that just repeated lines from funny movies.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
It wasn't like the original guy. Like I was like the guy that would say something different, and then everyone thought I was weird.
Yeah. I mean, that's such an interesting, and I've been, that guy. But for me, it was always, I love doing impressions. So
sure, yeah.
Whether it was Bill Murray in Caddyshack or, dating myself, I was a child of the 80s. It was Bill
These
Murray
are classics, man.
Steve Martin's rant at the rental counter in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Like, those things
so good.
I want a fucking car right now. That was, it was, to me, what I loved about it was like ingesting these long runs of dialogue, and then bringing them back as close to how the brilliant person who created that character, as close as I could to that. Was what I loved about it. And but just the same, like, it was not never like the full meal for me.
Yes.
It was always when in college, when we'd be at parties or we'd be places and everybody would be sitting around talking, and I would always have to take the conversation to a weirder place than everybody was taking it to. And I would always have to, get bizarre or dark or sick or something like that, because it was A, it's just who I am.
Yeah.
And B, it's something else is sort of towing you along. And the whole thing about sort of eating bags of dicks on the way up is that it's an interesting thing, because you do.
Oh yeah.
But you still, if you've got a knack for it, you do it better than the other people who are trying eating bags of dicks. And it's kind of like, it's interesting. Someone the other day reached out to me, a friend, because I live now, at Cruise TV, and I still do stand up, but I don't. That's not the only thing that I do.
Yeah.
A friend reached out and said, "Hey, I was thinking of going to an open mic because I have no ambition towards what I want to do with it. I feel like I should. I just feel like I should walk across those hot coals once." And my first thought was, without any, like, I don't know whether or not she'd be a good comic on stage. My first thought was, why the fuck would you do it without ambition? Like,
Yeah.
Which I told her, I go, I'm literally the worst person you could ask to go to an open mic with you. I'll get impatient. I will, if somebody asks me to take a microphone, I'll go up and I'll lecture everybody about what they're doing wrong. Like, I don't know what I'm capable of in that environment, but it's not being supportive, I'm pretty sure. And
I can completely agree with that, just because, I mean, especially if you don't have any ambition, it's just like, well, what are you doing this for? Like, because again, it's like I said, like, I do it because I felt like I had to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's why I did it, was because I felt like I had to.
Exactly.
So, yeah, like, why put yourself, even as an actor, why put yourself through all this rejection and just blatant, just like, this is how people really think I am just by how I look, know? Why would you put yourself through that unless that was something that you really wanted to do,
And it's something that is so, like, and I'm not disparaging stand-up classes
of
that people
course
take, or I have friends who teach those, and I think that in a lot of cases there's good information to be gleaned from it, but
agreed.
It's like, when you're I guess, for lack of a better term, probably sounding way too arrogant, but like when you're coaching at the pro level, if I'm working with Colbert, or I'm working with Joel McHale, or I'm working with, Wayne Brady, Kevin Hart, whoever I've worked with, I just named some names, didn't I?
Yeah.
But I'm not there to teach them how to do comedy. They're funny.
Of course.
They're world-class, otherworld funny. And I'm not, and it's not my, I can write funny jokes for them. I can have educated discussions about delivery, or about, word placement, or if it's a sketch, about how we're going to execute. And it's a very, one-to-one high level conversation because of the experience that I have. But I can't possibly, like, put funny into someone.
Of course.
And it's so, it's so hard to, that also doesn't belittle people who don't do it, or who try and, go out and get something a lot out of that experience. It's just that I kind of suck at relating to it, because, I took a bit of when my daughter was born, around 2005, I was doing the Soup, and I did the Montreal gala at the Montreal Just for Laughs Fest, and Joel and I toured and did theaters together until about 2008, and then I reached a point where I was really busy with the Soup, and I was really busy with the other stuff, and had a growing kid at home, and I kind of was like, I could swing by the Improv on the way home and sit around and wait for a Wayans brother to shut up and see if I can get some stage time. Or I could go home and watch something I made, go to sleep. I just kind of turned that other way finally, and took a bunch of years where I'd pop in and do spots, or if someone asked me if I wanted to do something, I'd go do it. But I just didn't aggressively pursue it. And then as the pandemic hit, and my kid got off to college back in LA, I started popping up at the clubs again. And one of the first things that I recognized, and now that I'm doing it more frequently in New York and out here in Connecticut, one of the things that I recognized was that I suck at being halfway there. Like, I really don't like to be good at something that I used to be really good to great at. And so I kind of had to make that decision for myself. If I'm going to do this, then I can't wander in, trying to brag about my head writer and producer resume, because that makes no difference in a comedy club. I got to go up on a stage and I got to be ready to perform, and I got to think it out, and I got to prep, and I've got to do the stuff. And it's been a fascinating learning experience trying. I still don't think I'm all the way to where I want to be.
Sure.
But I'm much closer to what I used to walk off the stage feeling like was success. And so, but it's an interesting process, to say the least. And, writing from a completely different point of view of a guy who last kind of dabbled in it when his daughter was 3 and lived at home,
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree more, man. I mean, I started in LA. So, starting in LA for me, for a lot of people, they would be like, don't start in LA, but I personally loved that I started in LA because it was very much everybody's great. If you're not good, get out, and like I said, I felt like I had to. So it made me get good really fast, as opposed to just kind of being in a place where it's just like, well, I'm funnier than these like 4 people in like Butthole Magoo, Michigan or something. You know what I mean? But it's like, dude, like, you're competing with people that are on network TV. You know what I mean? Like, and like, you're competing with people that have specials on studios, that we can't say because of the strike and things like that. So it made me get good really fast, and in a way I kind of feel like that's what's happening with you, where it's just like, like, it's gonna stink for a little while, but like eventually you'll get there. You know what I mean? Because comedy changes. It was a different time, when I started, and it's a different time now. So it's how it is.
Yeah, and it's interesting, in the time that I wasn't hyperactive on stage, there's so many great comics emerged. Like, if you want, you can go from Tone Bell, Mulaney, Andrew Santino, the Taylor Tomlinson. Good God, so many really, really, really brilliant, terrific, unique, distinctive, and so many different voices and lanes that voices are emerging from. Be it diversity, the diversity of great comics has just blown up. Or the amount of great comics who are diverse I has just blown up. And so it's a really, it's interesting, because I wouldn't call it a competitive environment. I think that thanks to the internet and social media, that people who are great and have something great to say get found and don't get, quite as much stacked against each other.
Right.
As they used to. And so you're just as likely to, laugh at something of Maria's that pops up as you would something that Chris DiStefano put out,
Exactly.
And so I think that there's like a wider and larger appreciation of comedy, like, at this same time, where in the other part of the business that we're in, when you talk about, what's getting bought and made as TV shows, is they're running from the hills from comedy, largely because there's so much of a pressure to have everything be a global success as opposed to a domestic success is enough.
Right.
And comedy just doesn't translate. Formatted comedy just doesn't translate well overseas. And so it's interesting. I think that it's a boom for stand-up. It's a boom time for stand-up right now.
Yeah.
At the same time that it's really like a fight to survive time for comedy television, especially.
Completely agreed. Yeah, it's a wild time. I mean, how many it's it's like more than a couple handfuls of people that are like selling out arenas. I mean, back in the day, it was like Andrew Dice Clay and like that was it, like,
Yeah.
and now it's like, Bill Burr's doing it, and like, we have Tom Segura and Bert Kreischer. I mean, all these type of people that are just like selling out stadiums. I mean, Gabriel Iglesias did his last special in Dodger Stadium, for Christ's sakes.
I know.
I mean, it's
we're
wild.
going, my wife and I are going in a couple of weeks. Taylor is doing 2 shows at Radio City Music Hall.
Yeah.
And I mean, like I'm so happy for her. I met her a long time ago in Montreal when I was there as business, and her manager, who used to be my manager, Judy Marmel, introduced us, and got to have lunch with her and talk just as she was doing New Faces. She was just getting started, and I've just been fortunate to be able to track her, and I'm so excited to go watch that. Like, I think about it and I go, I remember, this is 7 years ago tops that Chappelle was like the first comic to be able to set foot in Radio City.
Right. Yeah.
And now Taylor's doing 2 sold out shows is incredible. And,
absolutely,
and she deserves every bit of the success that she's got. So that's
agreed. Completely agree. She's such a, I mean, it's weird. Like if you want to get really comedy nerd about it, like her laughs per minute are just ridiculous. Like,
yeah.
It's like there is no fat in a single joke that she has at all. Like, it's like, it's unreal how inspiring that is. You know.
And she can just throw her foot on the clutch and go do crowd work for half an hour if she feels like it.
Exactly. Yeah.
My daughter loves Taylor and loves Mulaney so much.
Yeah, Mulaney's great too.
Yeah. But really, it's kind of like, that's just a fuck you to me, I think, is what it is. Totally uncool. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it is kind of funny that like the younger generation has gravitated towards Mulaney, because Mulaney, in a lot of ways, and I say this with the most respect, because I think he's one of the funniest people ever, because I'm so young. But one of the things that I've noticed is that he's basically just doing like old like 20s and 30s radio, like he's like, let me say here, like here's what we doing here, like that's basically his cadence. So
what does that tell you about like human nature and what's very deep in our DNA and stuff like that? Like, I don't think John makes a conscious choice to be that way any more than I make a conscious choice to sort of like, when I'm on stage and even in conversation, I get told by those who remember that I'm very much like David Letterman.
Okay.
And in my cadence and in my delivery. And granted, I grew up watching Letterman and I grew up admiring Letterman. And so I'm sure that I absorbed a lot of that over the years. But I think it's also just like, that's Mulaney's comedic timing genetic stuff. He's just of that. And there's a Borscht Belty thing about him that just you couldn't knock it out of him. And I think that says a lot about just human nature, and like anthropology should be studying this. Or anthropologists should, is like, how is it that people still laugh at John Mulaney's timing? And because it's buried in us those are the beats, some of the beats that work to launch a joke.
Yeah, and in fact, what's so crazy about that is like, and I say this a lot with comedians when I talk on the podcast to comedians, but like, it's the thing that separates us from that open micer that you were talking about, that is like, I mean, I suck, but I don't suck quite as much as this guy sucks, like that kind of thing. I think the thing that separates us from those people is that we are trying to be unapologetically ourselves. And that is what makes a comedian good and also unique, because at no point, are you like I'll use this example, which like when Demetri Martin was first getting famous, people were like, he's just doing Hedberg. and it's like, but he's not. You know what I mean? Like, he's doing Hedberg in that he's doing one-liners, but like he's not doing Hedberg at all. Like he's
and it's like, and Mitch would have said the same thing, I think, and it's the same thing like Mary Mack and Maria Bamford. There's so many people. There is some sort of similar, thing in there, and it's funny. Like that's another thing. Just going back to that open micer thing again is a little bit of like, because every once in a while, someone who never clicked suddenly clicks. And I think you nailed exactly what it is, Mike, is they find themselves.
Yeah.
They finally figure out what it is that, that makes them, sort of the unique beast. You kind of, when you see it, you go, oh my God, that person has sucked for so long, and now all of a sudden they're really good. I hope they didn't suffer a psychotic break. Like, I hope they like, because it's such a difference. It's such a, and usually it's a de-icing or a freeing of some corner of the personality that starts to come through and manifest. And it's amazing. And I think that like, you couldn't get Dimitri to be anything other than what Dimitri is, comedic.
Exactly.
He's a really good writer and he can write for other people and their voices and that stuff. But if you put him on a stage, put a spotlight, Dimitri can't do anything other than Dimitri any more than Mitch could do anything other than Mitch.
Exactly. Yeah, I completely agree. I want to swerve back into some childhood stuff. What were your favorite snacks growing up?
Ooh, let's see. Oh God. You know what I really liked so much so that when I was in Minnesota a couple weeks ago, I found it on a store shelf, and then I just found some the other day here in Connecticut.
Yeah.
They're so fucking bad. Chicken and a biscuit. Like,
okay. Yeah.
Why? But my God, I literally, I hadn't thought about them in years. And then I was in Walker, Minnesota, where my family used to have a cabin. It was a cabin. It was never a lake house. It was a fucking cabin. But I was at the store and I was there alone. I was up working on my novel, and I went to the store to get provisions, and I saw chicken and a biscuit on the shelf, and it just like so many childhood memories came screaming back to me. Like I stopped short of doubling down and getting Mountain Dew.
That's so funny.
Yeah, but that. I don't know what else. Child, I don't know.
I've never heard chicken and a biscuit. I've heard of it, of course, and I've had it, but I've never heard that was somebody's favorite. Because like, really, chicken and a biscuit is just white trash Cheez-Its, right? Like that's basically
There's no chicken in it.
That's how white trash it is. There's no chicken in it.
Yeah, and it doesn't taste anything like chicken. Like everything they taste like chicken. Chicken and a biscuit is so far. It's just salt in like yeast. I don't fucking know. It's horrible. Let's see. Oh, you know what? I flash back on this sloppy joes. You see a lot of sloppy joes. Yeah, and my wife and daughter don't like sloppy joes, so I don't get to make sloppy joes. There's a lot of resentment there. You remember you take hot dogs and kind of split them down the middle, throw a little cheese on them, and wrap them up in the Pillsbury crescent roll.
Oh yeah,
stuff. Yeah, those were good.
That's amazing. I love that. Those are some good choices, man. We also like to talk about cereal on this show because I feel like cereal is the food that encompasses childhood in a lot of ways. What were your favorite cereals growing up, or did you have any? Or
peanut butter Captain Crunch.
Sure. And that's still like tried and true, like your favorite.
My doctor would. I have all the things that God put in people to keep too many folks from being in the Midwest at the same time. I got high blood sugar, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. So there will be no peanut butter crunch at my breakfast table. I could just wake up and amputate my foot instead.
Well, what's great about living in the Midwest, I've always thought, is like, it might not be as cool as living in a city, but you do get to try a ranch flavored Sprite, so that's always nice.
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of like we're like the lab rats of
exactly.
Company. Like, here, eat this. We need to see what it does to you. I smoke so much pot that I would. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. That's so funny. So every episode of this podcast, I like to talk about a cereal with my guest, and usually I always pick a cereal that has something to do with my guest in some way, shape, or form. So
Okay.
I spoke with my sponsors over at Kellogg's, and by sponsor, I mean that I like them and I buy all of their products. And by
Mhm.
spoke to, I mean that I DM them on Instagram and they blocked me. So, the cereal that I chose for you today is Baby Shark cereal. Now, the reason why I chose this for you is because I feel like this is just a wonderful idea for a show, right? But like, yes, it's already a cartoon and I get it. But here's the thing. I'm talking Baby Shark Tank. What are your thoughts?
Baby Shark Tank.
Yes.
So
Meaning
is it babies are the investors and you
yes.
pitch babies on ideas and then they invest in your ideas? Is this where we're going with this?
I think what we I will give you a full pitch. Actually, what I would like for you to do is just be a studio head, and
Okay.
I'm going to give you the full pitch. Okay. So essentially, what I'm saying is that we can get 4 babies, right, wearing, of course, their parents' clothing, because nothing is funnier than kids wearing big clothes. So we have them in the circle or the half circle, and then another kid will come in with some sort of idea, like because back then when we were kids, we had lemonade stands, we had businesses, some of us had hustles, we would sell those like fortune teller things. But like, what if we can get somebody to invest on those things? So let's see, I actually have some music here, and I'll even give you a scenario. Here we go.
Hello, Sharks. My name's Caleb, and I have a lemonade stand. Now, I'm looking for 99% of my lemonade stand, and you get 1% of it. So every 50 cents that I make, you make a penny. I don't know how to do math, but so what I would like is for you to invest in my lemonade stand. And I already have some backers. I have Christy, I have Adam, and Tyler. Well, Christy isn't part of the club anymore because she called me a duty head. But so now it's just Tyler and the other guy that I forgot about. So what do you think?
Like, would a show like that work, you think?
No. I think maybe, first of all, what the hell do I know? I've made a lot of shows thinking they'd work, but I feel like if you want to pitch this at the network level, when the strikes are over, you're going to need to add like an angle, maybe like Nepo Baby Shark Tank, like
Nepo Baby Shark Tank.
They're the wealthy children of established actors.
Yes.
Or maybe the children of billionaires. Maybe like
very good.
That's a new
like
angle.
Blue Ivy. We can get Blue Ivy to be a part of it. We can get one of the Kardashian kids. We can do a bunch of stuff. Yeah.
Bezos and Lauren Sanchez will eventually, make some sort of a
robot baby.
Robot baby. Yeah.
Yeah. And they'll just be a drone wearing a suit for some reason. Pardon the brief interruption, besties, but me and my buddy Alf just wanted to talk to you about Childlike Wonder. Childlike Wonder is the official merchandise store of Mike Valdes and of Childlike at Best. As you can see here, there are some shirts with my face on them that say Comedy's favorite cartoon, as well as the Viewmaster collection, which is one of my favorite designs that we have. You've seen me rock many a t-shirt from the Viewmaster collection. Another is some of the church merch that we have. We have a shirt that just says church camp. We also have a crew neck that says unspoken prayer request, because as good Christian kids, we all had those unspoken prayer requests that were definitely rumors about Stacy or whatever person we knew growing up in the church. I'm so excited about this collection, and I'm so excited to release it to all of the besties. So if you want to support the show or support me in any way, please just go to childlikewonder.co and grab yourself a tee or a crew neck and tag me on Instagram. I'll repost you. I'm super excited for you guys to get into this. So thank you guys for supporting, and thank you guys for being so incredibly amazing. Now, back to the show. The idea of babies doing Shark Tank is kind of funny, because back when I was a kid, everything was like, if something's famous, make it babies. Like Muppet Babies. I mean, it was all that stuff. Like everything was babies. So I was like,
you took an interesting conversational route to get to that spot. By the way, you really wanted to do the baby Shark Tank thing. Like that's what you wanted to get out. But you did some angle in, so you chose the cereal thing and the baby shark, and I was just like, what? There's a baby shark. But I appreciate it, Mike. I appreciate how willing you are to veer from the path of what would make sense in a conversation. You want to say.
Yes, I mean I do my best here.
You're doing God's work.
No, I do. Yeah, we can't all wear capes, but I clearly I want to get back to you. So, you started in comedy and you were doing comedy, but then what was the shift that you had in becoming a writer and then becoming a producer, like an executive producer of said shows like The Soup and The Dish and The Nerdist Show and, shows like that?
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I got hung up on The Dish and Nerdist. I was like, When Nature Calls with Helen Mirren doesn't matter to you? Or stuck on The Dish? Sports Soup on the Versus Network. Anyways,
yeah.
So I was doing stand up, and I moved to LA in '94, I think it was, to pursue down that lane and figure out if I had what it took to act, and got into classes. And our mutual friend Scott Henry and I were roommates down there at that time.
Wow.
And over time, as I was doing more and more stand up and working on the road a lot, it was a good time to be a comic on the road, because a lot of great comics were who were getting talk shows, who were getting other things on those lanes, were out there with us, and there weren't these theater gigs and these big stadium gigs. So I was working with Bill Maher at improvs in Cleveland and in Minneapolis, and different comedy clubs around the country, and becoming friends with those types of people. And so the sort of common recurring theme that I would get a lot, because I was always working new material, I was very sort of unsettled in my, if I was opening for Bill, I wouldn't come with the same half hour every night. I would have 5 minutes somewhere in that half hour was laced in from writing during the day and from other work that I had done, and was looking to find a way to evolve the act. And it was those people, whether it was Bill or Larry Miller or George Wallace or Ellen or whoever it was that I was out with, who kept saying, your writing is unique. Your writing is the fact that you write every day, and the fact that you seem more like hell-bent on getting a new idea out there than having a great set tonight, doing the stuff that works. Maybe there's a road for you down there. And eventually, I got to LA, and Bill made me an audience warm-up person, sort of a fill-in audience warm-up person on Politically Incorrect, which was the precursor to Real Time, the show that he does now.
Yeah.
And I got on their fax list, this is back in the time of fax machines, was if you wanted to get jokes on the show, you could wake up in the morning, write a bunch of jokes, send them in, and eventually they'd get run by Bill. The head writer would pick out the ones that feel like they might be right for the show, and Bill would look them over, and every once in a while you'd get a joke on the show. You'd get they'd let you know that you had one that got close. He likes this, so write down this line more. Stuff like that. And over time, Bill had said, I think I'm going to bring you onto the writing staff when the time is right. And I waited and waited and waited, and it didn't happen exactly when I wanted it to. Mm-hmm. And I was getting frustrated. And so I just wrote a sketch packet and sent it to my friend Mike Dugan, who was a writer on Keenan Ivory Wayans had a talk show at the time. Yeah. I sent it to Mike, and I just said, "Will you just do me a favor? Is this funny? Does this work? Does this feel like something that would happen on Keenan's show?" And Mike liked him and showed him to Keenan, and then Keenan hired me. Wow. And so that was my first job. But then I was sort of like striking out at Keenan. I was very new. I didn't understand the politics of a writer's room or of how production works, and that's a whole other podcast. Yeah. But around week 8 or 9, Bill actually called Keenan and said, "Hey, how's KP doing?" And Keenan was like, "I love him, but he's not really scoring anything on the show." And Bill said, "Well, if you want to let him go, I'll take him." And so Keenan let me go. Bill picked me up, and so I got traded like a ball player.
Exactly.
And I did 9 months on Politically Incorrect, wow. And then I got fired. Mm-hmm. And then I got hired back 3 or 6 months later. I can't remember which. And I did another 9 months on the show, and then I got fired again. Bill kind of had like Dennis Miller used to have a joke that is like, it's a volleyball rotation. You serve till you screw up and then you rotate. And Bill and I have known each other forever and ever and ever and ever. And there was a day in the writer's room where he literally just looked across at me when, like, you would get told on week 10 of your 13-week cycles on your contract whether you're coming back or not. And it was like week 9.5, and we were in the room, and I pitched some idea to Bill, and he looked across the table at me, and he just went, "You could write a book about getting on my fucking nerves." And I was like, "I don't think I'm coming back in the next one."
Yeah.
enough. So
that's so funny.
Yeah, but he did actually got me hired. He got me a job with the company that wrote the promos for Politically Incorrect.
Okay.
And they put me on a show called The X Show for FX, which the producer there, Mark Cronin, took a liking to me and then made me the writer on that show and made me a producer of that show. And over that time, speaking of tour buses and stadiums and private jets, we hired Bert Kreischer as one of our hosts.
Yeah, I was just going to say, isn't that Bert Kreischer's old show?
Yeah. So we kind of that was sort of that I learned to produce while I was there writing and producing. It was nightly. The shows were nightly, and they were 5 days a week, and it was just a grind. And Mark sort of saw how I interacted with the talent and how I worked with, like how I positioned them to succeed when we talked through the material that they were going to be doing. And he was the first one who kind of went, you're a bit of a hybrid. You're more of a showrunner than anything else. Like, you can kind of do it all. And so not long after that, I went to, after the X Show, I think it was More Sports with Jay Moore on ESPN. Yeah. And then Last Comic Standing. And then, the Wayne Brady Show. As a head writer on the Wayne Brady Show.
Yeah, you sure were.
Yeah, between More Sports and Last Comic. And then after Last Comic, after season 3 of Last Comic, Ted Harbert, who ran E, called me and said, I've got this show. I think I'm going to cancel it in a few weeks. The host is a pain in the ass, and he's constantly in my office yelling at me. But why don't you come meet with him? And if you can keep him out of my office, I'll give you your next job. And that was the Soup and Joel McHale. And, Joel and I hit it off. And 12 years later, my kid was in private school.
Joel is awesome. I mean, the Soup, you're talking to someone who watched the Soup so much, man. I mean, I love that show. And, we've had some other people, from Boy Meets World, so be on this podcast. So, having Danielle be part of The Dish was super cool too. And like, I watched Absolutely. The Dish. Yeah, like I loved all that stuff. The biggest thing for me, this is just me personally, was the Nerdist, because I was so into the podcast, and I was like, I love the idea that you guys did with the show itself, because it was it was the podcast, but also it was so like its own thing where like, you know, being a nerd was loved and accepted, and it was really cool, you know, in that regard. So like,
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And just if I can, before I bounce forward to Chris, if I can go back to Danielle really quick.
Of course.
The Dish and Danielle, that era was really fun for me because you know we didn't, Joel and I didn't create the clip show format. We were sort of custodians of it. We inherited it from, you know, John Henson and Hal Sparks and Greg Kinnear and Aisha Tyler.
Yeah.
But then we sort of found our way through with Ed Boyd, the other executive producer. Ed and I got offered, you know, do you want to, from NBC Universal Comcast Entertainment Group at the time, said, you know, do you guys want to sort of try to branch this out and format it on the other networks that we have? And so we did The Dish with Danielle and Web Soup with Chris.
Yeah,
Hardware,
you sure did. Yeah.
And Sports Soup with Matt Eisman. And Danielle is so awesome. Like, very funnily, just 3 weeks ago, my wife and daughter and mom and I were driving through Connecticut, and all of a sudden I got simultaneous texts from Danielle and Joel, and they were, you know, killing time during the strike at some GalaxyCon fan fest thing in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Yeah.
And they were just texting me pictures of each other across the whatever stadium floor from each other.
I love that.
Danielle is crazy talented.
Completely agree.
She was so damn good on that show, and you know, the fact that it was a style network and it didn't have a ton of viewers to begin with, that we lasted I think it was 3 seasons, maybe 2.
Yeah.
But that we lasted as many years as we did. That's all Danielle and some great writers. Like we had Jessie Gaskell, who went on to she still works with Conan O'Brien. Oh my God, Danielle Koenig was in that group. So many great comics and writers in that group, and then Danielle taking what they did and elevating and lifting it and delivering it perfectly, and really working for someone who hadn't done stand-up and who hadn't been that type of host. She worked her ass off to get to that space. Yeah. And then Nerdist was really, that was BBC America, and that was under that same deal when Pygmy Wolf, my company, was under the deal with NBC Universal. And Chris had come to me. I think Web Soup had ended, and Chris came to me and said that he wanted to, you know, find a TV avenue. Chris was so great at being out ahead of where the public was. Ready to be standing on a spot. And that Nerds podcast just caught so much fire. He
was ahead of the puck, as Wayne Gretzky would say.
Yeah. Yeah,
you know,
because Chris and I were like, we auditioned together for a show when I first got to LA. We became friends when we auditioned for this show called Trashed, which was a precursor to Singled Out, which was Chris's show. And you know, we knew each other, then we would see each other around the way, and then we wound up doing Web Soup together, and we really enjoyed doing that show together. And Brad Stevens and Boyd Vico, who sort of ran and had wrote that show, were amazing. And then when we did Nerdist, it was interesting because Chris kept trying to explain to me, like, what the sort of intellectual difference between a regular comedy show and this needed to be because of the nerd culture thing, and because of his sort of place in it. And he and Joan and Matt, I went to one of their live shows, and I watched. Everybody laughed. Everybody got way into what they're doing. The jokes worked great. But afterwards, there were people walking up to these 3 guys, and they were hugging them, and they were saying, you know, you saved my life. I was suicidal until this came along, and I found out that there was a place for people who are like this, like me. And, you know, and like we talked about before, I sort of, you know, my daughter's very much a nerd. She's 20 and playing D&D with her friends at night, and very much in that nerd place. I grew to that place more than I came from it. And so it was really super educational for me. And it was super educational in, like, understanding why Chris wanted that show to be produced how we produced it. He never wanted to. It drove me crazy because I had to edit the shows. He never wanted to do just a 5-minute interview with someone. Like if we had Buzz Aldrin on, even knowing that 5 minutes of Buzz Aldrin was what we were going to be able to put on the show, like he was going to talk to Buzz Aldrin for an hour, and anybody that didn't like it, tough shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it really worked. I think I actually am pretty proud of that show. I think it was a really good show. I think that Chris and Jonah and Matt did a great job of being out in front of it, and yeah, it was a huge learning experience for me. I think we'd been able to do more.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you guys nailed it. I mean, there's so many things in your whole IMDb, kind of filmography, that is just like, man, like that's insane, and even, I wanted to talk to you briefly about this, working with Tim Allen and Richard Karn, on the Tool show, essentially like it's basically just Tool time in real life, essentially. Yeah. It's like such why like it's like why it took this long for this to happen is like why like that is the most obvious thing to do. This is great,
Yeah. And that one, so that was for History Channel, and that one was we were still very much in the pandemic when we shot that show.
Yeah.
Called More Power.
Some people were like zooming in some of the episodes, right?
Yeah, and it was a very weird production. But so Tim and Richard and I've known Tim for probably 30 some odd years because I started out, in the 80s when
in comedy,
Tim was doing when Tim was, he was doing theaters then, but he would come through Minneapolis a lot. He was a Midwest guy. And then Tim and Richard and I all play golf at the same course in LA. We're all members at this place called Lakeside in Los Angeles. And and Richard and I especially had become really good friends. And this show came up, and they had done a show the year before for History that was called Assembly Required, which was sort of a Tim and Richard were judging a competition of people in the maker space, inventors would get the same box of parts, and then they'd have to put them together and see who could create the craziest, best thing, most usable thing. And History said, they got their season of that, and I think it did pretty well for them. And then they went, well, we want to do something that leans more into sort of just celebrating tools and kind of going to Tim and Richard. And we shot, Tim has this amazing garage in North Hollywood where all of his classic cars are, and all of the stuff from both Home Improvement and Last Man Standing, his other show. He's got major pieces of the set stored there. It's an incredible facility. So we shot the all the talking and learning and screwing around and joking stuff in there, and then we'd go out and we'd shoot field pieces in like live working construction and demolition and other kinds of environments. It was really hard to make because we had very little time to do it, and we had to basically, I think we shot 10 hours of TV on 19 locations in something like 16 days or 17 days or something like that.
Wow.
And then when we got done, interestingly, weirdly, for whatever reason, the way that History Channel had made the deal for me was that I was going to be in charge of the show throughout the shooting of it, throughout the conception of the of what we're going to do through the shooting. But then I was going off the clock, and somebody else was going to handle post, was going to handle editing. And so this is my way of saying I actually have not yet seen the finished product of those shows. I was on by the time they started airing, I was working on the pickleball thing with Steven. And I've just completely missed. I should really go back and watch them at some point. But I think the most fun that I had doing that show was we'd do these things where we'd just like have Tim and Richard, we'd sit them down in a classic car, or we'd pull a couple of lawn chairs out in front of an RV and just have them shoot the shit about stuff.
I love that.
And they were so funny together. They were so insanely funny together. Yeah. And Tim like I love Tim. I genuinely think the world of the man. He's his choice to be vocal about his politics has labeled him as something that I don't think it tells the whole story of Tim Allen. Let's put it that
Sure.
way. I don't know a more charitable, more decent guy. When you go to this place in North Hollywood where his shop is, it's been beautified along the streets, and not because the city of Los Angeles or some part of North Hollywood did it, because Tim took it upon himself to plant trees, and every year he has that whole, it's like a 4-block area that he has rebeautified because he just wants to be a good part of his community.
Man, that's amazing. I have just a couple of last questions here for you before I let you go. You can answer them any way you want to. There's no wrong way to do it. You can answer it, comedically or vulnerably. They're both equally vulnerable in a lot of ways. And the first question is, what advice would you give to your younger self if you were to meet them today?
Be more honest.
Okay.
Yeah, I think when you're younger and you're hungry and you want to get places, and you're desperate to get places, you will you'll be more you'll grasp for what'll work to get to the next place. And over time and over years, I think what you learn from that is it may not slow you down in the moment, but it will eventually. And you just don't like yourself as much. You're constantly trying to remember what the fuck you told someone.
Right. Yeah. And now here's the ultimate question. What would that younger version of you, the purest version of you, as a child, what would that person or kid think of who you are now as an adult? Seeing your accolades, seeing your acting work, that you're a comedian, that you are a executive producer of all of these shows that have changed so many people's lives. What do you think that kid would think of who you are now?
So the kid, not the young man starting in comedy, but the kid.
Yeah, I would say, yeah.
Okay. Cool. I think probably right, cool. Yeah, like I can honestly tell you, like, because I'm 54, I'm not, I'm not a young man by any stretch. And I think that looking back at that time in my life, I wanted it to be fun, and I wanted it to be an adventure, and I wanted it to be, I wanted what I did to excite probably just me, but maybe other people too. And so, cool. I got to do it. I don't think the kid would be capable of thin slicing the bumps and bruises along the way anyhow. He wasn't capable of thin slicing the bumps and bruises he came home with every day.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Totally, man. I love that. Well, KP Anderson, man, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for being a part of this. It was just such an honor to be able to talk with you about how you got started and, like, just your whole trajectory of everything, and I really appreciate you for that. And before I let you go, can you please let our listeners know where they can find you online?
Where they can find me online?
Yeah.
So at IKP Anderson on Instagram is about the only one worthwhile. Like, I'm on Threads, and I think it's at IKP Anderson. Yeah, it's at IKP Anderson on Threads as well. I quit Twitter long before Elon Musk. I just kind of got tired of myself and everybody else who's constantly. Basically, I found Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, to be famous people trying to prove to other people that they know each other for some reason.
What a great way of putting it.
Yeah, and I just was like, I literally found myself tweeting something at Joel one day, and I was like, why don't you just text him? Like, because you need everybody else to know that you know a guy that you worked with for 12 years. Like, if they know me, I think they probably already know. What the fuck are you doing? Just text him. And so I texted him, and he didn't get back, so fuck him too. But no, Yeah, but I'm on Threads, and I'm on Instagram. I tend to be more about. I'm getting better at promoting things that I'm doing, but I tend to be more pictures of my Yorkie Phyllis and stupid stuff that I see along the way. And on Threads, trying to stay just jokes on Threads.
Sure, same.
I just don't care up to politics and yammering away with famous people. Nah. I think something funny I'll say there.
Yeah, not only that, like I use Threads always as like kind of like my open mic, where it's just like, look, man, like this app is free. Like if you don't think this is funny, then pay for a show. You know what I mean? Like if you give me money, I'll be funny, I promise. But
yeah. And the thing I really like about Threads is that I like to keep my likes in the lower tens.
Sure.
And so Threads is a perfect place to get 9 likes for something you worked a half an hour on rewording.
Exactly. Completely agree. What a great way of putting it. Oh my goodness. So before we end here, for me, you can find me at Mike Valdes on Instagram, at official Mike Valdes on TikTok. You can go to thekidfromup.com for my that is my website until Disney sues me. And that is all. Make sure that you are letting your friends know about this podcast so we can grow this family, and don't lose your sense of childlike wonder. Bye, besties.